Yeah, man. So really excited to have you. Your story is incredible, and I want to get into that. But before we get into some of the deep stuff, I know it's going to be emotional. I want to get into some of the foundation stuff, the stuff you were doing before your life took a turn. You started off with Beyond the Bar, but before that, you were working in Rise and you were working as a bartender. And what it sounds like to me is you kind of combined it the two. You found like this niche and this combination of the two skill sets that you had and kind of brought it together. Can you kind of talk about how that experience and how that business started?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so again, thank you for having me on today. For anyone that will be listening in here, we'll try and not ramble as much as we can, but two people that get passionate about things, sparks will fly, love and happen here. So, um, back beyond the days. So I started out went to school, went to college for kinesiology and exercise science. Went in there with the intention actually of becoming a state trooper and wanting to get my personal training certification and things like that so that I could have my own gym and I could be a state trooper. So my dad was a state trooper. That kind of set the tone, and that sort of was this guiding governing principle that kept me out of most trouble that I could. And then I would kind of have this business. But the reason why I knew I wanted that was, one, it was kind of all I really knew of how to help people. I wanted to help people, right? So I picked two professions, one to keep me healthy and longevity and strong, and the other to help other people. So anyway, graduated from Westchester with that degree. Came down here, actually helped my parents. Down here is Sussex County, Delaware, down the beach, and came down here to help them build their house, their essentially their retirement home, or where they would retire, and ended up really liking it down here. So after we graduated, we stayed, and I say we because I met my wife back up in Westchester, and yeah, we stayed down here. I got a great job. First, I'd done many summers in the restaurant industry, and that was kind of the way that I helped to pay through school and just, give the easy breezy funds of life, essentially at that point, the fun life. And my whole goal was to get into personal training, so that's exactly what I did. I got in at Rise, and that down here was one of the best gyms I'd ever seen, and their ownership was incredible. They were just all into just what was their saying? Fitness and adventure, Rise Fitness and Adventure, and it was just kind of so out of the box. It wasn't CrossFit, it wasn't strongman, it wasn't your typical cookie cutter gym. It was all of it, man. So it provided the perfect opportunity for me to help others, and that is exactly what I got into it for. I wanted that kind of pre-PT background to bridge the gap between physical therapy and personal training. I love the sports psychology component. That's actually what I got into schooling for. I wanted to go be a sports psychologist because I was always a head case, and I knew that the mind played such an intricate part in the body. But 15 years ago, whatever it was now, there was nothing on that
Yeah.
field. So yeah, that was the route. Started personal training, working in the restaurants, and I always say I was a bar bender by day, bartender by night, and that dual lifestyle served me well for a long time. But it also, everything happens for a reason. And around the time when I was 24, 25, that's when I had said to my dad and my family, everyone at that point, that's when I would call it. That's when I would become the state trooper
Right.
and do this, right? And so, it was kind of either crap or get off the pot, so to speak. And yeah, I just remembered it was when a lot of crazy stuff started happening, and everyone just really, really did not police at that time, law
Yeah.
enforcement. And I had changed. My heart had changed. I knew that I couldn't do this anymore. I didn't know what that was, but it was one of the hardest talks I ever had was with my dad, who, was one of my heroes, but he's well, he's trying to push me. He's pulling all these strings to try and get things going. And I was like, Dad, I got to tell you something. I don't think this is I don't think this is for me anymore. And he's like, you've been saying this your whole life. What do you mean? I was like, no, but I don't want to do it anymore. And he's like, all right, well, he's always been very like
Right.
militant minded. Well, what are you going to do? I don't know. I don't really know, but I know I don't want to do this. And I tell anybody now, that's always a really good place to start. A lot of people don't know what they want to do in life. But if you don't know what you want to do, well, figure out what you don't want to do because I knew I didn't want to spend the rest of my life unhappy and unfulfilled there.
Yeah.
And what learned from that was that served as the guiding compass to say I wanted to help people, I just didn't know how. So I stayed in the restaurant industry because it was good supplemental income. And
Yeah.
then I stayed personal training and just really doubled down in that business to try and serve and help others the best way I knew how. Now, I did that for years there and also kind of found myself in the process of just exploring myself and traveling and deepening my relationship, and then the restaurant was just always there. That's the way I would
Yeah.
describe it. What I didn't realize was that the restaurant was one of the only things that was like keeping me, how do I say this, the the personal training component of getting up early and trying to help other people. That was the only thing that kept me from blacking out every night and not
Yeah.
showing up and living that
Right.
lifestyle. So I would live it like just enough, this like perfect harmony, so to speak.
Yeah.
And and I did that for years, man. And like in the process of finding myself, as a personal trainer, as you've done too, your body is like, I would say the mind is the captain, the body is the ship. So
Yeah.
if you want to try and get somewhere, you need the ship to be in prime, optimal conditioning. So the body is sort of this like physical conduit for mental boundaries. So
Hmm.
that's why I always say too, if you want to push something, like start pushing here, start showing
Yeah.
yourself what you believe is impossible. And it started pushing boundaries, pushing boundaries, pushing boundaries. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, man. I'm all in. I get married. And it was kind of this, I had my first life-altering diagnosis and this will segue, because I was doing, working in the restaurants, making good money. My wife was working in the restaurants. We were just kind of like putting things aside and working on our lives together. And I got hit with this. Actually, I was bench pressing one day and dumbbell benching, dropped the dumbbells on myself and went paralyzed from the neck down. And I was like, what the hell is this? Turned out, long story short, went and got some MRI, got some testing done, and I had something called syringomyelia. And that was these fluid-filled cysts that were forming in my spinal cord.
Shit.
They were causing all of this pressure and inflammation, and it was causing these like short circuits in my body. So essentially, I 235 pounds, deadlifting, benching, and all this stuff, 1350, whatever, between my three lifts.
Yeah.
And here I was like blowing my neck out, carrying a keg out from the bar.
Yeah.
Couldn't even bartend some nights. And it was like, God, what am I going to do? And this guy basically told me, he's like, well, don't hold your breath. He said, like metaphorically or physically. Like, well, both. Back then, there wasn't anything to do. So he said, right now, it could not turn into anything, but it also could potentially get worse. And I said, like this? And he said, worse. It could lead to numbness, paralysis, and eventually
Mm.
loss of function. And he said,
Wow.
since yours is in your neck, I'm fortunate, you could lose that from the neck down. And I was
Ooh.
like, dude, I'm 28. I just got married. I'm like, I haven't done anything with my life. I'm just, living, just, felt like I was running the rat race. And that was sort of like this shook me to my core. I wanted to just make an impact and I felt like I wasn't doing it enough. And I'll never forget. So I went into the restaurant. I was working at Paradise bartending, and I was listening to this bartender that came in that day, and she was just miserable. I just had this great conversation with these customers, right? I walk away, miserable bartender comes up and just starts like bitching, like
Hmm.
about like her life and how bad things are, and all of a sudden And I see the people, not just their body language change, but then they, who were on vacation, started commiserating with her. And I
Oh,
just watched that whole energy change, the
yeah.
dynamic, and I was like, oh man. And all because she was like hungover, right?
Right.
And I just saw how toxic that was, and I was like, wow, somebody should really create, a business to help people in the restaurant industry work on themselves
Right.
because
Yeah.
that, I mean, that is powerful. That's a domino effect. We're talking about, hundreds of people every single day. If you can reach
Yeah.
them, you could change the world. And it was kind of like this light bulb, like, well, why don't you? And I always say it was like this download from God because at the time, again, I, from the outside in, had it like all together. I was helping people, I was living moderately healthy, but I didn't have it. I was a train wreck. You know what I mean? And especially in the terms of like starting your own business, I didn't know anything about that. And I'm like, dude, I'm gonna help people like that? No way.
Yeah.
It's one thing to just personal train. It was another thing to start a business and life coaching and speaking. And so that turned into a whole year of like self auditing, taking all my bad stuff, turning it into good, distancing myself from everybody and everything, and just really going deep, deep, deep into the realm of like, who was I? And
Yeah.
that was also, a whole different story. That was around the time I got saved and found Jesus.
Wait,
And
right before you go there, I want to say something real quick. So,
yeah,
I've never heard this story before, but just the way you did this, been describing it, it literally sounds like my story almost to a T between like going from bartending, quitting a job, knowing that it wasn't my purpose, kind of like you with the police as a police officer. I was like, I can't see myself doing this. And then kind of like trying to figure out where can I help? Where can I like what skills do I have, right? It's like literally the same thing. And then you're like, all right, well, I'm gonna have to work on myself if I actually want to make an impact. And it's pretty cool that the stories kind of like line up with like, I know I want to help somebody, but how am I going to do it? I know I want to provide this. And I think a lot of people are in that spot where they know they want to do more. They know that they want to make an impact, but they don't know how to do it. And now you're going into the story of where this is where you kind of learned about yourself. And I think that's the most important part is like you need to learn yourself before you can go help other people. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to kind of put all that together because now I know you're about to go talk about the stuff that you did and like you were just saying being saved and all that kind of stuff.
no, I mean, please, and stop me at any point too, because that's the revelation right there. It was taking, because a lot of us see the finished product, especially today, and like we see the outside world, we see the final product, or we just see what people want us to see. And
Hmm.
rarely do we ever realize, like, especially like, sound old, but like pre AI, pre just like having things prepped and done and all that
Yeah.
stuff. One of the things that I had realized was outside of same questions you probably asked yourself was like, well, you don't know what you don't know. This is one of the best lessons I ever got. And it was from the dumbest guy I've ever been taught by. He was like the head of the department up at college. And
Yeah.
day one, took this chalkboard, whiteboard, and he drew this big circle on there. And he goes, everybody, this is what you think you know? So then he draws this little sliver. He's like, this is what you know. Bigger sliver. This is what you think you know. This is what you don't know that you don't know, or that you don't know, right? And then he's like, the whole thing is like what you don't know that you don't know. And the reason I like at the time didn't mean anything. Now I realize like you don't know what you don't know, right? So
Yeah.
the vastness of that is infinite. But when you're trying to learn that new skill set, well, how do you figure out what you need to know if you don't know what you need? You know what I mean? And it's either proximity, getting around people, it's trial by error and failure, just putting the pieces together and just like, oh shit, whoever can fail faster and learn
Yeah.
from their mistakes is going to get there first. Or it's being able to just like have that courage and either ask the questions. What I had realized from that was my mindset was the biggest thing holding me back at that point.
Yeah.
And this is pre-COVID era, so I'm personal training, and one of the biggest things that I found was this self-limiting belief that used to drive me nuts, and it actually kept me trapped, was, oh, you're just a bartender. You're just a
Dude.
personal trainer.
Yes. I can relate to that so hard, bro.
Dude, how trapping is that? It's
It,
just,
it's you tell yourself this lie every single day, and then it just like eats you alive, and you start to believe it, and then you're like, you feel immobilized to even do something because you're like, who are you really though, man? You're just a bartender. Like, how are you going to go start a business?
yeah, exactly. And, especially when you're looking at skill sets or you look at degrees, and everyone values your sense of worth off, okay, well, what does this piece of paper show? What have you learned? What have you got this? And, okay, well, you're not going to validate it by like, well, I did read like As a Man Thinketh one time, like, but that was the truth. And what I realized, and this is so true in so many ways, the very thing that we often use as our self-limiting belief is usually the key in which, like, that holds our key to set us free. And that belief, think of it like a gate. That belief that you just keep running into and running into keeps you stuck. But when I began to look at, I'm just a bartender, I'm just a personal trainer, and I'm not going to be able to, and I was like, hold on a second. Just a personal trainer. Who am I training? And I'm looking around, and I had established like this reputation and things, and all these people that I'm training, and oh, another one. I'm in Sussex County. I can't get around anybody. Like, it was levels. I just kept getting these, new levels of self-limiting beliefs.
Stacking lies. Yeah.
In Sussex County, I'm not around anybody that's like, in New York City and Florida and this and that and that. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, hold up. You know how many people vacation here? You know how many people I
Yeah.
train that are business owners? And that's
Right.
their like coming here as secondary. I
Yeah.
started looking around. I'm like, well, wait a second. This is a sandbox of proximity of people that are very successful that built something from nothing that.
Yeah.
When I changed that and I was like, I'm just a personal trainer. I'm like, but I'm just a personal trainer that is in very close contact with just a bunch of business owners and just a bunch of people who started from nothing. And I have that ability. So like oftentimes the very place in which you're like stuck can be
Yeah.
your sanctuary. And that's where I had to change it was, all right, well, I can ask all these people because they trust me, they know me, they have this. And I'm like, so, hey, and when I changed that framework, I started to pick everyone's brain that I could possibly learn from. I was going out and trying to recruit, clients to learn from. And I was even bartering services. I'm like, yo, you don't have to pay me, just teach me.
Just let me know what you know. Yeah.
Yep, and then I'm just a bartender. Well, I'm just a bartender, but that is, I'm not even going to touch that because like
Yeah.
your ability to communicate, to learn, to
Yeah.
multitask, like,
It's
and
crazy, right?
network. And that was the piece there that I was like, if I can apply these two, so I go into the bar and I do the same thing, and I'd be like, where are you from? And they're like three questions, like, so what are you doing with your life? Or what have you done? Da, 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 and more often than not, too, like you got to break out from autopilot. Anybody that's in the industry that's in this
Yeah.
frame of mind, and that's
Yo, I had my first client came from bartending. I remember I started my online coaching business, and I was like, some guy asked me, "What do you do?" I was like, "Well, I train people, right?" And that was my first client. He was like from Maryland, but it was because I was bartending, networking, meeting people, and he was like, "Man, you look great. Like, can you train me?" And I was like, "Of course." But yeah, like I used to say the same thing, but like you said, learning all the skills. Every job that you have, you're taking stuff, and you're taking like the communication skills, or like when you're bartending, you're learning a lot about people. You're learning how to read people. You're learning how to make people happy. You're learning how to provide a good service and deal with like everybody in the restaurant. And like you said, even just reading emotions of other people that you're working with and how it's affecting you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I like that. I just want to hit on that point.
don't apologize, dude. People need to hear that. If anybody hears that, like, don't short sight yourself either. Besides the self-limiting beliefs, if you go to apply for a job, like people skills, you go in and, dude, there's how many bartenders and servers would say they're more qualified than their therapist to
Yeah.
read body language, to know if you're walking up to a table like, oh, this is gonna be bad. Now, not letting that trap you,
Yeah.
and creating that preconceived notion about that individual, because that was, way number three around that was, okay, now I've got around other people. And then I'm like, well, this person, this was very selfish in how I got around to this, because it was like, okay, well, now I only wanted to learn. I only wanted to be around people that wanted to learn, and everyone else that
Yeah.
I was around that wasn't doing that, I I wasn't proud of this, but it served me the way that it needed to. Was, oh man, I started looking at people different, and that was
Yeah.
not the Christian way to do it, right? It was like,
Yeah.
and it became very self-serving, and often again, like, forgetting the same lesson applies here. It's those people have more to teach you than the people in which you're trying to learn from, because the people that you don't want to be around are usually people that you're projecting something or a
How do you?
version of yourself onto, right? And that's what it was all the time. I'd be looking at people that would just get me
Yeah.
banged
Just like
up.
you.
Like,
Yeah. You're like, man, that's
this
me
guy,
inside. Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, oh man, I don't want to be here. I want to talk to this. I got to work on this. And it was like, wait a second, just pause. Like, or they challenge you personally, in which, that's a whole nother beast. So anyway, that's kind of like what I was learning in the process. I rearranged my whole frame of mind. I knew I wanted to serve at a higher level and a higher calling. I started to self audit. The biggest and greatest thing to happen in that time was being saved, um, and how that changed my heart, which was the missing ingredient. And that's where I knew I wanted to serve, not just like this world and help others, but like I wanted to introduce people to Jesus, and I wanted to just be able to give them that level of peace and forgiveness in your heart that you don't need to feel. You need to impress this world. Like, that's where it kind of comes down to. Everything else falls in place. So anyway, that was sort of like the building blocks. We got things rolling, and then it's like, this kind of segues into life at this point, right? Because we've been married, I'm all in on the Kool-Aid, and there becomes that certain point in every young entrepreneur's life where they know, as I would say, or maybe Tony Robbins started it, right? But if you want to take the island, you got to burn the boats.
Yep. Burn the boats.
Burn the boats merchandise still available at Ryan Ennis.
Burn the boats.
So that saying stuck out so much to me there, because you get caught, so many of us get caught in the accumulation of knowledge phase, that can create its own
Yeah.
complex that you can't get over. I got to read this book. I got to read this. No, the knowledge isn't power. The application of knowledge is power. So I needed to take what I knew. I needed to take the fear, and I needed to put them together and burn everything behind me. And that was
Yeah.
like going out on my own, getting, all the uncomfortable things that you didn't know how to do, and putting them together. And then the Kool-Aid was drank. 2020 was the year. We're ready to rock. My wife, she believed in me, and I had planted some seeds heading into that year. So I started off and off to the races, like 2020, January, awesome. February, greater than I ever could imagine. Like, people are starting to get it. They're building momentum behind this. March, cool-ish. Somebody sneezed in China or something,
Yeah.
and the world fell apart,
Yeah.
and it was like, okay, well, that'll be fine, right? No. Um, so it turns out, like as many people experienced during COVID, it shut the world down, including restaurants. Okay, now at that time, I was marketing to only restaurant individuals. I pulled all my eggs out of the basket. I left personal training. I left bartending, because I wanted to be taken seriously in this role, right? So I didn't have a whole lot of savings backed up at this point.
Wait, so you completely just, like you said, burned the boats. I was about to ask you that, because that was something I did in my life too. I quit teaching and I quit bartending, and I said no backup plan. My dad and my mom were like, "You're crazy. Like, how you gonna make money?" I said, "I want to make money through the business. Like, if I have this backup, I call it the safety net. If I had the safety net there, I got something to lean back on. I got money coming in." But like you said, when you burn the boats and you can't go back, I was about to ask you that. So you completely got rid of all the other income when you started the business?
Yep. Yeah,
Love
I
it.
had to. I knew I had to because
Yeah.
leading up to that point, it was just as discouraging as it was trapping because I would find, as I was bartending, it's mental masturbation, you're telling people about it so much that you get caught in the high and you get addicted to telling people what you're going to do. And that same feeling, right, of
Yeah.
why. So people that love like big dreamers and things, we love the why. We love to tell them everything we're going to do over the next 10 years, 15 years,
Yeah.
right? But like, okay, what's step one? Step
Yeah.
one is execute. And that's where I had to get to. So I left that, and I was only doing like pickup shifts here and there anyway at that point, but I knew it just had to cut ties.
Right.
And same thing with personal training. I was like, when I created Beyond the Bar, I kept this hybrid model of health coaching. So it was, Beyond the Bar health and wellness coaching. The body, again, conduit for that. So I was personal training, but only restaurant individuals at that time. And that, that was a whole brand. I was like just trying to brand that and nail my head against the wall of something that didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was like, okay, well, restaurants shut down. So does the income of all of your ideal clients. So it was like,
Yeah. Damn.
now what? So we're
COVID
sitting in
check.
this house, and then this is kind of where life really started, right? And I saw something the other night that said, when when you're ready, like when you start telling people about your dreams, when God puts you on a task and you feel like you are called and you're ready to go after it, and you burn the boats behind you, be ready, right? Now, most people, things can work out for and you just audible. But there's always that smaller percent of the things that you're just not ready for, and that
Yeah.
was very much our case. So, um, it's kind of a two-way call. When you're telling God your plans, remember, the devil's on the line too, listening. And he said, "Oh, really? Those are your plans, huh? Well, how about that?" So that's kind of how things rolled, man. We lost the job. I'm like putting the business. I'm trying to scramble, do everything I can. I'm building this like at the time it was called like Mighty Networks. So it's kind of like school. I was trying to build one of those on the back end so that at least I could teach and coach people from behind the scenes. We could do some like small group coaching, little things here and there.
Yeah.
Anyway, life balanced out. Anyone that managed, you figured it out during COVID. And that's where we ended up. My wife got pregnant during COVID. And it was like, I had just turned 30, and it was, anyone that I think is ever had a kid and wasn't quite ready for it, but excited about it. There's like this noise. I think it's just like, like I'm not qualified for this. I'm not ready for this. And then it was like, I don't have a job. I don't have a house. Like we were renting this house for a
Yeah.
long, and that, ironically enough, it was like, okay, well, at least we have shelter right now, and I'm going to figure everything else out. Like a month later, my landlord and my friend at the time calls me and he's like, well, sheds are getting sold for $500,000. He's like, hey, buddy, turns out we really would like to sell the home,
Oh my
and
God. Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, I don't blame you. Okay. Like just trying to figure this out. I don't remember if I told him then or after, but now I'm like, holy shit, dude. Like, all right, now this really got real. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I think we thought about it, we talked about it. We're like, well, we need that. It just changes everything in your priorities, right?
Right.
And the shoulds go to a have to and must. And that's where it shifted. And I remember I called him back and I was like, listen, I don't need you to feel sorry for us right now, but I said, it's a little difficult and I want to know if I can buy the house from you. Brittany's pregnant and we want to be able to do this and this. And he was like, he came back and, we debated it for a while and then he ended up, he was like, sure, we can do that. we wanted to close. He wanted to close, much earlier, but we couldn't do it. So,
Yeah.
dude, I'm scraping pennies to get by. I'm doing everything that I possibly could. And during this time, my body just started falling apart, and I thought it was just stress. And
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, this sucks, and just like literally, it started in my hips, and my hips were just kind of falling apart, and I thought I had a torn labrum. Going to the doctors, they're getting X-rays and doing things, and they're like, just go to PT. That made things worse.
Oh,
So we're trying to put all this together. We end up like months go by. We're going to closing, and it's like we're ready. We're all right. My wife is like 7, 8 months pregnant here. I'm hobbling around on this crutch. Can't figure out what's going on with my body, but I know it's like we're about to get this done. Just enough time to renovate, and we go to closing, and everything was good. And then all of a sudden, we get this call, and it said, 3 days before closing, Mr. Ennis, yes, I'm very sorry to let you know we made a mistake on the closing. You actually, instead of this number, it's this number. And it was just over $10,000 more than we had expected and
right.
budgeted for. Now, mind you, like 10,000 may not sound like a lot, but 10,000 to us was everything. I had
Yeah.
nothing else. And I'm like, I've never been that defeated, that ashamed, the inner voices of just like, you loser, like you
Yeah.
got yourself in this position. Now your wife got behind you, she's pregnant, you can't provide for her.
Damn.
And there's a quote from Jim Rohn. What is it? If you don't want something bad enough, you'll make an excuse. If not, you'll find a reason, something
Yeah.
along those lines. And that basically kind of shoved me into this corner where it was like, there's no longer this like, oh, shucks mentality. It was like, you need this. You absolutely must. And I ended up just like, before I even went and told my wife, because I'm just like breaking in this room right now in a glass box of emotion. And I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do? And exactly what you just said. It was like, well, you still have the LLC. You're just not thinking of it. And it was
Right.
going to be this download from God. I changed the script, and I was like, okay, well, take everything that you just learned in the last 2 years and apply it in whatever way that you possibly can, and upsell beyond anything you've ever done before.
Right.
And I had 3 days to do it. So I had 3 days to come up with basically, $12,000. And within 6 hours, I think I came up with like 15. So I had sold
Shoo.
4 different packages to like, several different, like really successful business owners at the
Yeah.
time.
That's amazing, man.
Just like, what did I just promise? I have no idea what I'm doing right now. But it, gave them the kitchen sink and the
Yeah.
intention, right? It's not just like, hey, I'm going to borrow this money here. It's like that money needed to do it because we need to renovate this house now in order to live in it. So
Yeah.
it did. We delivered on it, man, and we just powered through. We made it happen. It was basically like executive leadership coaching and filed into this whole health and wellness approach. So we're doing nutrition counseling, we're doing, fitness stuff, and it ended up going great. And that was this feeling, man. We put like just enough money to renovate the house. Last nail goes in. By the grace of God and the help of my family, man, we got this thing done. We pulled it off, and her water breaks essentially. We go to the hospital, and it's like, dude, everything coming down to this moment, like this is gonna be it. This
That's
is
amazing, man.
like we need it. This is amazing. And it was anything but that. So before I go on, do you have anything there?
Oh yeah, that was awesome. So there's one thing I noticed that you said a while back. You were saying that you don't know what you don't know, and then you were treating people at the bar like you didn't, or people that you were hanging out with like you were kind of side eyeing them, kind of not wanting to really like be associated with that lifestyle anymore. And one of the things that's helped me the most is exactly what you said. They don't know what they don't know, and I always take that into account when somebody says something that offends me, or they do something that I just don't think's right. And I'm just like, but they don't know. And I used to not know. And you used to not know. And you're ignorant to what you don't know. And you can't really do anything about it until you know, until you get that, until you do the work. So that's one of the things that's really helped me. And then, yeah, going through with your back up against the wall. And you're just like, I got to make this work. I think it's Tony Robbins always says, you get resourceful when you have to, right? When you need to come through, you find a way. And the way's always there. We normally just don't have enough pressure on us or enough reason to go get it. That fire is lit underneath you and you have to go get it. That's what I always tell people when they're like on the fence of like, should I work with you? Should I spend the money? Should I invest in myself? I'm like, I mean, you don't have to, but if you spend the money, you're going to find a way to make it. You always have, right? You've always found a way to not be on the street. You've always found a way to make it happen when you have to. And it sounds like you were in that situation. And not only did you prove something to yourself that, wow, I'm capable of a lot more than I thought I was. Like I'm coaching these business tycoons now and stuff. But you also did what you had to do to get that thing done in 3 days. So it proved to yourself, hey, when I need to buckle down, I'm going to be able to do it. So that story was awesome, man. I mean, there's a lot of lessons in there.
That piece right there, like pressure is a beautiful thing. So is stress. You know, one of the biggest things that we coach in any of the programs with Beyond the Bar, and especially with anyone that I talk to now, stress, yeah, it gets this very negative connotation, especially from what we found in the restaurant industry. You know, we talk about this a lot. My partner in the restaurant business for Beyond the Bar, Lo Tibbetts, she's a godsend. I wouldn't be able to do this without her, truthfully. But it, it, stress can be one of those beautiful things. The basic principle is that most of us view stress as, you know, and it does have very negative side effects on us, right? So we see stress, we look at it as this demon, you know, and we talk a lot about it, how it's this innate ingrained thing that was, you know, primitively put into us to either survive or thrive, right? Fight or flight. So we're supposed to exist in that like rest and digest state. However, you know, back in the day, it was ingrained in us that we have this innate ability to become superheroes in the moment and to flee or to fight something and fight off an enemy tribe, a saber-toothed tiger, whatever that may be. Well, the thing is like that system existed in human beings and it still does today. The thing is like, you know, we always say is, yeah, the times have changed, but the systems have not. So why might that be problematic if you're working in a restaurant industry that requires you to operate in a high stress environment, but the stress is ticket printers and people's orders and you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
It's not life or death.
you're not being chased by tigers,
Yeah.
bro, but your brain is still firing the amount of cortisol and it never switches off. So it's just under that from start to finish. And then what's worse is the more we're exposed to that, the shorter the fuse becomes. The brain always wants to be right. So it's going to remind you of when you got buried in the weeds, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, we don't want that happening again. Remember that? And you start to think about it. You get like, it's happening. So when you can't come down, I mean, aside from all the things that you know and you coach people on as well, it's like, how do we take that though and turn it into a positive? Because we can only control the controllables. So we can't get rid of the stress. We can't get rid of negative thinking. We can't get rid of any of that, but we can control our reaction to it.
Yes.
So one of the biggest things is that instead of, you know, I always say with self-awareness, it's we need to control the ability to respond to our thoughts, right? Rather than react to the emotion that's caused, right? So the emotion is that like, or the feeling of fear, of anger, of like jealousy. You see that person that you went to high school with, right? And they pull up in a Maybach and you're like, oh, you know, and shame kicks in and all this kind of crap. Like that's the emotion, but the thoughts that's preceding that, that's where we need to catch them and be like, hold on, I don't have to go down here. I don't have to circle that drain. In the same way, we need to be able to look at stress as a good thing, right? The Michael Jordans, the Tom Brady's, the Kobe Bryant's, the best of the best of the best. And the reason they're so good is, besides their preparation and all this stuff, it is their ability to control their stress response. And you think about that, right? Like Tom Brady, say what you want about him. I can't stand him, but I love him as an athlete. because there's nobody, Patrick Mahomes, there's nobody that you want on your team more if you're
Yeah.
down at 14 and it's, seconds to go, because they feed on that. So how do we change our response to that and be able to say, all right, I can breathe through the stress, breathe through the fire, and use this as that catalyst. And like you said, pressure is a good thing. It's around you all the time. We just need to be able to put ourselves into it and breathe in that moment to see the opportunity in the window rather than feeling like it's all closing in on us.
Brother, you're hitting on something huge here. Like, I don't want to, like, this is huge. This is great coaching right here. So I literally did this yesterday, right? I was recording my first podcast. I had anxiety come up and fear, and I don't get that much anymore. But it came up, and I was like, ho, I haven't felt this in a while. I was like, all right, come on, let's go. Come on in. Because like you said, it's how you react to it, right? If you feel anxiety and you give a big reaction to it, your brain's like, whoa, this is bad. He's reacting big time to it. Let's ramp this up even more. But I was like, okay, anxiety, here you are again. Come on, let's go. I closed my eyes and I literally did what you said. I said to myself, well, this is just a biological response. This is outdated. I said, I'm not in fear right now. I was like, let's take a deep breath. I went and looked myself in the mirror. I said, you got this, brother. I believe in you. I love you. And then I started jumping up and down and hyped myself up, and it was gone. But if I would have been like, oh my God, I'm stressing out. Oh my God, like maybe I'm not qualified to do this interview. This is my first podcast. Who am I? I would have went crazy and wouldn't have been able to get started. Yeah. And people, they react like that, and it just like you're putting gasoline on the fire. You're making the anxiety worse. You're getting the stress, the fear, and then that's when you end up folding, and then you never go forward. But if, like you said, just breathe, relax your body, sit there, and it's just a feeling. Like if you push it away, it's going to come back. But if you just, all right, oh, okay, I feel that. I feel you. All right, I feel that fear. What am I going to do with this? I'm not going to get upset about it. And that's one of the things in my past that I was terrible at, controlling my emotions. Like when stress came in, I would just like lose it. I'd be like, why is this happening? And I'd stub my toe, and then it would just be like the end of the world. But now I'm just like, I laugh at things. I'm like, well, I just dropped peanut butter all over, like it's everywhere, but what am I going to do, you know? I just kind of laugh at myself, because the other thing is you feed it and it just gets worse. But I love that point, because you have the ability inside of this mind to react to it however you want. And if you want to have a big reaction, it's going to give you that big feeling back. But if you just allow it to come in and breathe and say, okay, we're cool. I see you. I recognize you. Let's sit here. Let's see what we got to do. And then it's going to go away.
That's awesome, dude. And the fact that you can still do that, because it takes a lot. Like, I think a lot of people also assume, and I've had this multiple times, and I can tell it throughout this story changes, but I still battle with anxiety. It's still there. I do war with it all the time. And especially, the bigger you get, the bigger the dream, the bigger the goal. Like, it's still there. It's always there. But, what you just said is why that's so detrimental is it kills people from starting. It takes away momentum. And one of the things I heard that was always so helpful is this is confused excitement. Like anxiety, fear, nervousness, like you said, it's a biological response. It's outdated. But it's also confused excitement. And when you start to think like, I can be the buzzer beater because, well, history shows me that I've choked. Well, history is always being written, right? So this is a new opportunity. And like great lessons right there, dude. That's such good fruit for people to take in.
Yeah, that excitement. So like you said, you can think about it two different ways. Your heart's going to start beating. You're going to start feeling tense. Your breath's going to get shortened. And you can be like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like, that means I'm excited. I'm ready to roll. Or you can be like, oh my God, I'm having a panic attack. Like, what's happening? And then your whole life is like, your whole scenario is going to change based on how you decide to define that feeling. So just like literally let it come in, because I think the book Letting Go by David Hawkins is where I learned this technique. Anytime you have an emotion, we always want to get rid of it, right? We're always like, all right, let me get on Instagram. Let me go out and drink tonight. I don't want to be with this emotion. And if you do that, okay, you're putting it off for a little bit, and then the next morning it's going to come back tenfold. Or you can just say, okay, what is this emotion? I don't even need to label it, but I'm going to feel it. And I'm going to allow it to sit here. And eventually it just runs out, because they always run out. They're just temporary. And when, like you said, it's an outdated system that doesn't work for society really much anymore. And once you can change that thing that you're saying in your head to yourself about that emotion,
Yeah.
you can take care of it right there.
Bingo. Those three things that I just wrote down too that you had touched on. That was one of like the easiest, most I would say simple but difficult. Um, don't identify it, like, or just don't associate with it. What people say, I'm a procrastinator, I'm an anxious person, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have this, or I'm depressed. What you just said is like, okay, it's there, whatever. All right, it doesn't mean this. Check, choose how you're seeing it right there. Don't resist it. Feel it. Know you're not dying. Breathe through it. And then what you said too, recognize the state that you're in. I love that too, because it's, this is what I'm having. This is, it's kind of like the tale of two wolves, right?
Yeah, the parable,
Which,
yeah.
which one wins? Like,
What you gonna
whichever
feed?
one you feed.
Uh,
And where, what I love about your response to that is, okay, so I'm having it, I'm gonna let it in, I feel it, I feel it, I feel it, like, and as you said, like, the biggest thing for me too that became so helpful was almost laughing at it, like, truly, that's usually what the response is once I realize, I'm like, I'm having a panic attack. Okay, yeah, you're a life coach having a panic attack. All right, now. And then changing the state, so changing the emotion. And sometimes it's twofold. Like you said, you breathe through the initial response
yeah,
of it.
100%.
You're not fighting it. You're not
Mm,
like,
gotta,
resist,
gotta come
resist.
in.
Let her in. Breathe through it. No, remind yourself, like you said, I love you. I'm here for you. You got this. You've done it before. It's going to be
Smile
all
in the
right.
mirror, yeah.
And then you shift it and use that same energy because that's what it is. It is electricity. It is energy. It is in your body. Change that state and use it to your like your energy, your positive vibration.
Yeah,
Jump around, tap, breathe, like,
yeah,
and that's literally. And when I started, even just as far back as the restaurant, dude, when I would do that with people, or I'd say go in the walk-in and just start smashing. Sorry, owners,
go.
start
Yeah,
smashing fruit. Start like getting in there and like, and you see them,
yeah,
you come out, and that's the difference of state. Changing state, you shift everything. Now, there's some situations that you're able to do that in which, again, yeah, we have control over. And then, like, from this point on is where I had to relearn everything that I thought I knew, right? So,
yeah,
getting becoming a father is already one of it's it's kind of like the demarcation line in a man's life where you go from being just a man or a husband or a provider or just a man, whatever it is, to okay, I am something more to this thing. I have this responsibility outside
yeah,
of myself, and that thing was like it is only going to live or die based off of how I do this, right? Yes, and that's independent of mom. What I do is going to impact this child for the rest of his life. And that responsibility like comes in a lot of different ways. And as I was saying, like as a parent, it is instantaneous. You hear them all the time, most time. Well, I guess not all the time, but you hear parents always say like it just changed the moment you look at your child. Like things
yeah,
change. And it's so crazy because the moment we laid eyes on them, you know that you would give anything in the world, anything for that child. And that day, we went to the hospital. My wife did everything she possibly could leading up to her entire pregnancy of giving, our son the best fighting chance to have a healthy life that he could. And there are just some things that happened during that day. And it went from being one of the greatest days in our lives to one of the worst ever. So, yeah, we were told basically, we're in the delivery room. It's taken a little bit too long. There were some decisions that were made that should have not been made. And I'll never forget that feeling, dude. And this is what gets me choked up, because I went from 3 people in the room to slowly filling up to hearing these things over the intercom. Like you just feel that you, and I remembered looking up at one point because I'm just trying to keep my wife calm, and I look up and this room is packed now.
Oh,
NICU teams, like
oh,
neonatal intensive care, the attendings, the doctors, like the residents, everybody in this room is all here. And what I saw in that moment was very different than just the obvious. And it's
yeah.
seeing everybody like bouncing, jumping. There's people that are literally doing breath work, like, and what they knew that I didn't at the time was my son had already stopped breathing. So in between contractions, his heart rate was dropping in the single
True.
digits. And they knew, like, I could see and palpate that energy, that they knew as soon as he came out, if they didn't do something, he was going to die. So they ended up getting him out. Very dramatic delivery. They rushed him right up to the
Wow.
NICU, and he had what's called an HIE. So um, it was not good, and it basically just, it wrecks the brain. And a lot of children will die from that immediately, and that is kind of what we were told. So 3 days after watching him
Man.
suffer, watching him just fail organ by organ, and 3 days after watching his brain activity go from seizures to nothing, we were
Damn.
sat down and we were told that we would have to choose between either having a son that would be so severely disabled that his quality of life would not be worth living,
Oh my
or
God.
not having a son at all. And we would have to
Oh,
possibly make that decision sooner than later.
wow. That's the craziest decision.
You can't, you
I
know.
don't, you don't even know. No one's prepared for that ever. That's unreal.
No. And that was the moment, and, call it denial, but that was also our sense of faith. It's like there's something that you can choose and there's something that you just can't. And I said,
It's like, did you, like, your lifestyle leading up to that? I mean, I know you drank and stuff like that, but it couldn't have been
yeah,
like anything that would have set up lung cancer.
dude, esophageal cancer would have made sense, right? But knowing what I know now, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And it was, plenty of lifestyle habits that could have pointed toward it, but yeah, never smoked. Um, Toted devil's lettuce every now and then, but not enough to do that, and it wasn't, yeah, I remember that feeling of like, so, now what? What do you, but that same feeling of, it's insane. The message from that is one, like, I'm, I'm a father, right? We
How long ago?
assume
What's the time difference between being
one and a
born?
half.
Wow.
Well, between where we had Cole and when I got diagnosed,
Yeah.
yeah, about a month and a half.
Wow.
So we had only been home like, a month and a half. All of his appointments during that time. And so that was 3 years ago, right? And during that time, I'm like, I'm a father. Like, this doesn't make sense. I just got married. I'm starting my
Yeah.
business. Like, no, this is wrong. And there was virtually nothing in my lung to even look at there. So it was
Yeah.
crazy. None of it ever made sense, like how it got out. And
Yeah.
the other piece of that was, how quickly our minds will go from the very thing that we were fearing, which was this bone graft was going to be so inconvenient to me that I was like, man, I'm gonna be out of commission for 6 months and blah blah
Yeah.
blah, was now the thing that I would beg to take
Yeah.
out,
Wow.
right?
Man.
So that's very intriguing. Now that's the buildup of, all of that. And I go to the hospital, I go to MD Anderson, I do the staging, I do all the stuff, and she had basically told me, you know, she said, "Listen, she had everybody in the room. It was this Romanian chick, and I could tell she was beating around the bush. So once everyone left, I talked to her one on one, and I was like, "Can you just be straight with me? What are the odds as advanced as this is?" And she said, honestly, 2 years.
2 years. Wow.
2 years.
2 years.
And I was like, okay, done. Like
That's how you reacted? How did you react?
that. I was like, fair. Okay, done.
You just
Like,
accepted it already, going in there, kind of?
oh no, it was just game on. Like, that's
Oh,
what you think. This is, like I said, dude, I had just been given a miracle, right?
yeah.
So when you've seen something like that,
You're like, I know. I know what
all
this
right,
is.
yeah,
Yeah.
now, does not mean that during that time I have not had multiple days of feeling like it was it, and but that was 3 years ago, over 3 years now, and a lot has happened in that time, and even more so, from just being wrong. It defined my faith in so many ways. It showed me so many great things, and it was so challenging. In the beginning, it just became, all right, well, again, I knew this purpose. Your mortality is your greatest gift of all
Yeah.
time for motivation. But what it
Yeah.
also did was it turned the clock, into like hyperdrive.
Yeah.
I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, and I gotta
I
do
got
it
two. Yeah, you're
now.
like, well, yeah, 2 years. I got to do all this stuff. But you, in the back of your mind, I'm sure, like, no, it's not 2 years. Like, I'm going to get through this. And I'm sure that's a mentality. The only reason you've made it, I'm assuming, so far is because you've had that mentality. Because I mean, as a man thinketh, you mentioned that book. It's just what you think about, you start to manifest. And I mean, I've never seen anybody as positive as you with all the stuff that you're going through. You just described having that birth and having to make that decision and dealing with those challenges and then getting hit with this right after. But if I met you and had a conversation with you, I'd have no idea that you're going through all this stuff. Just the way you present yourself, the way that you show up every single day. So I think, I mean, from the outside looking in, I mean, I feel like that is your biggest gift and that's what's keeping you going.
Yeah. Yeah, it's thank you, by the way. I appreciate that, bro. That really does mean a lot. And it's yeah, I don't have a word. I truly, people say it lightly, but like God is the only reason that I'm still here, because I can't attribute anything else, and everything in our lives has been so, I thought this was when I got all that started, right? Like after I got diagnosed, after I had a son, I thought that that was again this sort of like, all right, this is what God wants me to do. He wants me to speak on this story. He wants me to use my diagnosis as a testimony,
Man,
for His glory, and use Cole's situation to show that nothing is impossible. Never give up, and like never give up on the Lord. And then what was crazy was like I thought that was the story, bro. But there was always something to it, because I knew we weren't done, and obviously I wasn't dead, so the book
yeah.
isn't being written, right? But the other piece of that was, okay, well, life goes on. You start to get used to it, and a lot of people, a lot of cancer patients will get used to it as well. And it's like, okay, yeah, I had no intention of dying. I have really, really, really bad days and stuff, but you just kind of find this balance, and I have a rock of a wife and a support system. But when you see your son, I mean, it was this whole nother feeling of like, I'm not going anywhere, dude. Like this
Yeah, I
is
can't.
crazy.
Yeah, I gotta be here.
And once he turned a year, that's when we kind of knew, like, all right, we we had always wanted a bigger family, and we weighed that out for a while. Obviously, it was crazy. Like, why would you do this? You have cancer. You have bad cancer.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
um, obviously,
But but at this point, you're believing like I'm not dying from this. Like you have to be
yeah,
going into it with that mentality, and I feel like you're
there
so
was.
convinced.
Yeah, but the thing is, it takes two. So, well, it takes even more than that, but it takes at least two, because I could say that, right? And I can believe it, but at the same time, I can't predict God's will for it. So
Yeah.
I had to make sure, like, my wife ultimately was the one that made this call. And that's the courage that she has
Wow.
behind me,
That's
because I could
amazing.
say, I want this. Well, if I die, she's the one that's left with it. And
Right.
so ultimately, she made the decision, and I stood. We're a team on it, but she's the
Yeah.
one. She was like, "I want to. I want to have another
Yeah.
child with you, and regardless of what happens,
Man, it's powerful.
we will raise our family so that they never see an obstacle, as adversity." And
Wow.
so a year and a half or so goes into it, and we're like, why not? So, yeah, we decided to have another child, and God graced us with another boy. We ran through the ups and downs of that, and that's I can't do that, and I just need time. So my wife is a very private person. We kind of pulled together, and I was like, this goes beyond us. I believe in the power of prayer. We are Christians, and we believe in the God of miracles. And we
Wow.
put out that prayer, and I laid it all out on Facebook that day. It was 3 days later. No one had heard from us. And literally, bro, from that point on, from the moment that I poured out that prayer, and ask, just that's it. We didn't want money, we didn't want anything. Now the community came together in incredible ways. But what
Yeah.
God did next, dude, was it was nothing but a miracle.
Oh my God.
And the 7 days after, 7 days after I put out that, his organs started coming back online one by one. He was producing wet diapers. He
No
was
way.
like coming off of these things. His arm was actually paralyzed completely, like had no nerve to it, no stimulus.
Wow.
Um, and he's moving his arm again. He's
You're
coming off
like,
these
what?
medications. He's not having seizures, like having brain activity. And yeah, dude, 7 days later, we sat down with that same team, and they're like, I have never seen this before in my entire life, but she said I've never seen this type of healing, um, but you have yourself a miracle here. And it was almost as if in that moment, I always say, God kind of gave us coal, and he said, like, look, I've shown you now that I can do the impossible, because what's going to come next is going to take a
Oh,
lot longer, and you're going to have to
brother, God, I got every hair in my body standing up right now. This is
I know,
crazy. That's crazy. Wait, oh my God, man. Hold up, I have a question for you. All right, so how long before all this happened? Because this decision,
bro.
I just couldn't even imagine being in those shoes. Like that is crazy that you had to make the decision, and you're like, how long before did you said you got saved and made that connection with God? How long ago before did that happen that you had to make this big decision in your life? And how much did that influence it?
2 years. That was everything.
Too.
I wouldn't have.
You wouldn't have?
Yeah, no, because I got saved on February 11th, 2018, and that changed everything for me. That's its own story of how that
Wow.
happened, and that was the only reason that I had the faith to put forward that much. People say, hey, thoughts and prayers. This was like, I don't I'm not accepting anything other than a miracle here, because that's all this is going to take. And my faith had been so anchored in God because of how much closer I'd gotten to it. But yeah, I mean, it's the relationship and the trust that you do believe in God. That's what faith is, right? The substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of that not yet seen. And
It's amazing.
that's where we had to be. So it was like we got that. We left the hospital like a total of like 13 days, I think, which again, crazy. And we're seemingly like, let's go. This is our life. This is our second chance here. Well, if you remember, my body had been falling apart at the seams, and since you've kind of, disclosed that too, I was going to doctor after doctor. Well, in the hospital, my, stress response, my body was holding it together. Maybe God was just keeping, hey, just focus here for now. And so I got out of the hospital. It started falling to pieces, man. And I'll never forget the feeling of going into my son's room about a month after and standing over his bed, and I couldn't pick him up. I physically could not pick up a 9-pound baby because I was afraid that added weight would snap my legs.
Wow.
And I just was like, something's wrong. And fast track, a lot of different situations. They did some biopsies, they ran some tests. Crazy situation. I go to this doctor in New Jersey, MD Anderson, one of the best hospitals. And, she's like, does this biopsy, tells me she'll call me in 7 days. I hear back from her, and she's like, great news, you don't have cancer. And I was like, what? That's amazing. Like, how do you know? And she said, well, the cells didn't come back as cancerous. And I guess at that time they were looking for bone cancer because it was a bone net that they biopsied. And I was like, wow, well, that's incredible. So, like, what was it? And they're like, we don't know. We're going to give it another week and we'll check and see what the cells come back as. And I was like, okay, well, what about the thing in my lung and my shoulder? And she's, what do you mean? And I said, well, it popped up on the CT read that, there was something in the lung, but it
Yeah.
was like pneumonia. And she said, yeah, I think if she thought it was anything other, she would be pretty aggressive about that. And I was like, okay. And this thing in my shoulder, and she said, I don't see anything on the scan. I was
Damn.
like, okay, cool. Well, I'll give it a week. And she said, so for now, celebrate because I never have the chance to tell people this. Well,
Wow.
a
Oh
week goes
God.
by. Yeah, didn't hear anything, and I just knew, and you just
Yeah.
had that feeling. And I'm like, ah, all right. So a week goes by, and she calls me back, and that's basically what she was like. I am so sorry. It was a rainy day in June, and one of my best buddies was in there hanging with my son, and I took it out in the car, and it just, pouring down around me, and she was like, I am so sorry. We made a terrible mistake. um, the biopsies came back and they found lung cells in the tissue that they biopsied. And the only reason there would be lung cells in that is if it came from the lung, traveled to your hip through the
What?
lymph. And I was like,
Wow.
all right. And she said, so what that means is we're not looking at bone cancer. Originally, they actually just thought it was something called an osteoblastoma, and they were going to go in and just resect the bone and do a graft and all
Yeah.
this stuff. No cancer, whatever. Then she said, we're not looking at bone cancer. We're talking about lung
Oh.
cancer. And she said, and I was like, lung cancer? She said, yeah, it's the only reason it would go to your bone is because it's from the lung. And the only reason it had ever traveled is because it must have gotten, grown beyond this. So what that actually means is it's metastatic. So you have stage 4 metastatic lung cancer, which is the leading cause of death among all cancers.
Wow, man. Oh my
You
God.
know, never been a smoker. And I was like, well,
That was one of my questions.
it was very challenging. And, you know, the whole time we're still raising coal. We're trying to make moments matter. I'm fighting cancer. I'm trying to build my business. I'm trying to, like, what is this going to entail? Like, how do I change the storyline here?
Yeah.
And to help people, what is that going to do along that time too? That's when I brought in Lo, my business partner for Beyond the Bar, because I said, she was a client of mine at the time. Well, years before that,
Yeah.
she had become the protege, the sensei, man. So like when I was going through all this, I was like, I went and approached her and I said, listen, I feel like God has put this calling on my life to help other people outside of the industry. And I feel like I need to step into it with everything that's happened. So she starts naming a bunch of people like, oh, you should try this person and this person. I was like, talking about you. You've not,
Yeah.
you've not only been through the program and crushed it, but like you've made such massive changes. And what I love about her is that she's always growing and changing and admitting, all right, where I'm falling, where I'm working, where I'm doing this, and so I was like, nobody understands it better than you. So she really took over Beyond the Bar at that point and allowed me to do what I wanted truly from her heart. Like she's like, you go fulfill your dreams. Like,
Wow, man. Your team, man. This is awesome. I'm like literally I'm feeling this right now. I can feel like this is crazy. This is an amazing conversation, brother. The story is awesome. So I actually talked to Lo yesterday, and she told me the same thing. She's like, Ryan came up to me and approached me and was like, I need help. And she's like, I was listing off name after name, like this person could help you that, and you were like, no, you're the one. And she was like, me. And that's another thing right there, just not believing in yourself. And she had all the skills, she already did all the work, but she didn't believe that she was the one ready to do it, and didn't even cross her mind, which is mind blowing now that she's crushing it and like taking over all the responsibilities and stepped so far into that. It's amazing. But that's awesome.
she's a stud, dude, and will never take credit for it. Like, in terms of how the things that we'll do and like and what she'll come up with, and there's still even levels of Beyond the Bar that haven't been touched yet because she still battles with that inside.
Right.
So, but that's the fun part about it. It keeps levels to untouched. So that was kind of like All right. Well, we got the systems in place. We got the team. My parents were behind us, and we're like, okay, let's go for it, right? So, baby number two, uh, Shane, that boy, he was just filled with surprises along the way. And you know what's funny is sometimes you think that life can't get any more difficult. And I've never been naive enough to think that because when you start to count gratitude and you start to count blessings really from the heart, you
Yeah.
know where it's like, well, that would hurt. Well, that would hurt, and like, that's a lot. Like that could always happen. And I've always lived there. So I've never been in a situation in which I didn't think, I couldn't. It can always get worse. It can always get worse. But you got to balance that with hope, with faith, with optimism. You know what I mean? Because if you stay there waiting for the shoe to drop, it's bound to happen eventually. And
Yeah.
you're going to suffer twice because you're not enjoying life now.
Yeah, you're not living in the present.
And yeah, that's kind of where it was. So going into this situation, what I did find myself saying was, well, at least we can't have another child with a brain injury.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. So,
Wow.
heading into the birth of Shane, that was just a saga. So, leading up, crazy things happen in threes in the weirdest way, too, because, things were rolling smooth as
Mhm.
smooth could be for us. But then it was like this series of things. My dad's best friend passed away from like a very sudden stroke, like at his
Yeah.
house. Just he rolled over, and they think it could have been COVID related or vaccine related, whatever. But either way, it passed in one of my dad's best friends, right, a long time. So it rocked him. 2 days later, we're staying at their house while we're renovating our house. My son Cole ends up having a febrile seizure and seizing on the couch, like a super high fever and just
Wow.
eyes rolling back. My wife is like 9 months pregnant at this point, so she's like, "Oh my God, like, are you kidding me?" And or 8 months pregnant, so we take her to the hospital. Like it's this whole thing. Then on Christmas Day, she dropped this, TMI, but like had a blood clot episode, and it was just that. It was a mess, you know what I mean? And like all these things leading up to it, and you just have again, when your hope is just set in this world, it can crumble. But when your hope is set in Jesus, it's like there's something greater that I'm like, God, I don't know the plan for this right now, but I just need to keep in faith because momentum is one thing, right? Like
Yeah.
motivation. That's why I always say it's BS. Because over these years, it's like this and
Yeah.
this. You just got to stay consistent. So, all of that happening, my son is born on January 20th, and it's again like it was a beautiful snowy day. We're kind of rehearsing, like getting her in the positive mindset of like, hey, PTSD, we got this. God's going to take care of it. And what I've been saying this entire time, the main reason that we had Shane is
Uh,
because how I thought the story was going to change. Because we said, God is using us as an example so that he can inspire others to not live in fear, to live by
yeah.
faith, not by fear, right? To have
I
another
love
child,
that,
even
man.
though that terrifying thing happened,
Right.
like he wouldn't, there's no way. And so what happened was Shane had a rough birth, and at some point in that time or in utero, they're not sure, he had a blood clot traveled to his brain, and he had a massive stroke, a stroke that would have
Oh
killed
my gosh.
anybody over the age of 5. And
What?
it took out half of his brain. So it took out the left side of his brain.
Oh
And
my.
we didn't know any of this at the time. Like he came out okay. 24 hours goes by. We're like, all right, we're almost in the home front, but something seemed a little bit off. He started having seizures, and
Oh
the seizures were a byproduct of the stroke. We didn't know the stroke happened at that point. So the seizures kept increasing, and we're like, hey, we're out down here at BB. And we're like, long story short, got to go to Nemours. We do all this stuff, and I'll just never that feeling of sitting down with like another team of doctors, watching your child so helpless and you can't do anything about it. And then they told us that he had a stroke, and ultimately, okay, well, what does that mean? And he would have severe cerebral palsy, and potentially everything from not being able to walk, to speak, to eat, to breathe on their own. Like you just never know.
What?
Yeah, dude. So it was so heavy, and that's like, then the gravity of everything hits you. Like, well, hold on. We already had a son that had this. We
There's no
already were in
way.
a situation like financially that this was, and then everything in which you work so hard to put yourself in this. And the reason I'm going here is because it's like you build up that positive mindset, right?
Right. To get tested.
When it gets tested, it's like, wow, you're so dumb. Like, how could you possibly think this? And now you're in a situation in which you have a special needs child. You have these things going on, like, and you have terminal cancer, and now your cancer's progressing, and
Yeah.
so your brain just turns on you in a dime.
It'd be
And
easy to kick yourself there and be like, dude, what were you thinking having a kid in this situation,
you
right?
idiot.
Like,
Yeah.
what were you thinking, man? But no, it's like but you're able to flip it again. This is crazy, man. This is a powerful story.
Yeah. I mean, you have to, and that's the thing is like it. We were actually embarrassed. We really were to share that publicly because at that point, it was like,
Yeah.
what? Like, of course, the people are gonna think like you guys are dumb, like. So yeah, you're a glutton for punishment, and yeah, but the reason I
Wow.
even share that story was because that was after Shane's birth, and the last 10 months up until that point have been the hardest months of our lives for obvious reasons, but the biggest part was my faith that got tested. So for
Yeah.
3 months, I didn't post anything, I didn't share anything, I didn't want to, because I considered altogether just giving up on this
Yeah.
speaking, coaching, anything, and just
Man.
in submission of like I didn't know what to do. Everything that I felt like I believed, I had based this whole belief in like God would save our child, God would
Yeah. It's just
help
like one
us.
after another, though. You're just like, I can't catch
It's
a
just,
break. Everything I believe in him, but
yeah,
like, what is this? Like, maybe, man, I could see where you could start second guessing yourself.
second guessing that and second guessing something so powerful that you root your identity in,
Right.
right? And something that is not a self-limiting belief, but a self-empowering belief. When that becomes tested, and yeah, nobody was helping. I couldn't talk to anybody through it. And, I'm still going through chemotherapy at that point, and the cancer had kind of like, I was in a little bit more pain. So anyway, I remember this one thing. It was about 3.5 months in. Brittany took Cole away one day. I got chemo, and this one medication that I had to take for nausea one time it's horrible, and it's like an antipsychotic. So I'm sitting there and I'm like holding Shane, and I remember this day of just like I started having the darkest thoughts, man. And I was like, and it just, as I'm sitting there, I'm looking at him and I'm worried about his life. I'm worried about my life and all this stuff. And I'm like, man, would it even matter, you know, if I just died? And I remember
Bro.
like holding him, looking at that, like, what good am I? And that feeling, it was almost like it didn't come from me. It
Yeah.
was like, whoa, hold on,
Man.
like that's that's a little too. Where did that come? Like I recognized it, and I was like, hold up, same thing. I broke state for a second, went outside, started to breathe, and when you're truly depressed, it's not happiness, it's not fleeting, it's not any of that. It's
Yeah.
like, yo, this is here, this is present, but that was different. And I started
Yeah.
to think, and I'm just like praying, and I'm holding him, and I was like, you haven't had that type of thought. Like, that ain't you, bro. And I
Man.
started to pray, and in that moment, like, I could not pray anything, and I had not prayed in a while, and I'm
Wow.
just like angry at God, and I couldn't think to anything that wasn't just like anger or rage or confusion. So I just started to pray the Our Father, dude, and that was the only thing I could think of.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And then I was like, I forgot where I was. So I started over and I'm like, Thy will be done, thy will be done. And I was like, why can't I couldn't think of the next line. I'm
Yeah.
like, am I making this straight? And I did it again, dude, and it like, thy will be done. And I just had this like light bulb moment of your will be done, not mine. And the realization that that came through was in that moment,
Man.
that was when I realized the reason we were so hurt was because we put our human expectations on what God was going to do. And I put all my eggs in that basket that God was going to do it because I wanted it. My will be done. And I was trying to bend God's will and wrap it around with this expectation that He was going to do this thing. And that ain't how God works. And
Man.
that's why so many of us get hurt and we don't see God for His goodness, is because it's, okay, when I'm here and you didn't deliver on this,
Yeah.
you must be bad, right? And it just completely shifted me in that moment that I just started to think about it, man. And it was like almost this outpouring of love and these thoughts that I hadn't had in forever of the people that love me, the messages that like were outpouring, and more
Wow.
importantly, too, the love that I couldn't feel for myself in that
Man.
moment. And dude, it just came pouring back, and I just broke, man, ugly cried. And it was like that same feeling like I had come face to face with the enemy, the devil at that point, and I'm
100%.
holding him, and it was like this feeling, and you described it earlier, like, oh, you're having a panic attack. Well, that's what I was having before I did that. And as I'm trying to go through the motions of like, all right, fall back into your breath, fall back into this, and
Yeah.
nothing was working, I realized, and that's when I started to have that thought of like, what good are you? You can't do this, you can't do this. And that's why I was like, I turned to prayer as a last resort, but God was there, right?
Yeah.
And that's when it just, it made me laugh
You
because it
surrender.
was,
Yeah.
dude, yeah, like he had to pick me up at my brokenness, and he needed to allow me to get to that brokenness in order to find him again and trust him again. And yeah, man, it was like I came face to face with the thing that I had always feared the most. And it was like, and I'm still
Brother,
here.
this is wow.
We're still
Whoo!
here, still rocking, you know what I mean? And it shifted. Now, that was months ago, and a lot has happened since then.
Like
And
I hit on that real quick
yeah,
because that is powerful, man. Like that is just an unbelievable story. Like it's hard to even comprehend because none of us have been through that. Like to go through your first child not even supposed to be alive, to being alive, being a miracle. And then you getting hit with cancer and they're like, "Oh no, it's not cancer." And then they come back to tell you a week later that you're going to die in 2 years. And then you had to put all your faith in there and then you decide to go have another kid. Like this is crazy. And then he comes out with cerebral palsy, and you're just like sitting there. And I think this, all right, it's not, this is very dramatic for most people's lives, but this is a teaching moment that we can't gloss over. Like you're sitting there and you're just like, I'm giving up.
yeah,
I'm useless. I'm not enough. Like why I should be like who was I to even try to have this kid again? And I'm sitting here just like, what the hell am I? What are you doing, Ryan? And I think so many people get in this moment, and it might just be with a relationship going through a breakup, and they're sitting there thinking that they're worthless, or they failed the last 5 sales calls, and they're just like, I suck. Like I'm not even meant for this. Like I'm worthless. Or it could be so many different things in your life, or you failed to diet the third time. Your story is hard to compare to, but it's so powerful because if you can do that and all the circumstances that you went through, all the things that you dealt with, and you still had the ability to dig deep, surrender to the higher power, to what you truly believe in, and continue to not only beat cancer, to be a rock for your family. And you have 2 boys now that are looking up to a dad are going to be like, wow, look what my dad's been through. I'm going through some stuff, but I have this role model in my life that has could have gave up so many times. And I have a mother that believed in me so much and believed in him, decided to have me as Shane. Like this story is just unreal, brother. And I think this is such a great learning moment because we all have these things. And like my life, I can't compare to that, but I can relate to moments where I'm like, man, like, am I doing the right thing? Like, am I worth anything? Like, should I even go? You should go back to teaching, bro. Like, you're not going to go inspire people. Like, what are you doing? Like, so you have these thoughts, but what your story is proven, like, no matter how many times you get kicked, no matter how many times, if you have that faith and belief, and you can still believe in a higher power and believe that you are here going through this for a reason, and you're a master of framing. Like, that's one thing I'm taking from you. You're a master in framing and saying, okay, I had to go through this because I'm going to be, like you said earlier, inspiring people around the world with my story, with the person that I am, and like the things that I overcame. And if I can overcome this, somebody that has something in their life that they're battling, I'm a damn good example of somebody that can overcome that thing now. Brother, it's just I had to go into that and just like take that moment and just express it for everybody else because man, that's powerful. And you guys got to go on Ryan Ennis, the motivator, and look at his kids, like the cutest little kids. His content's amazing, but dude, that was a powerful story, man. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I had to get that teaching moment there.
No, I wasn't sure how much time we have, obviously, running into it, but that's what you just touched on there. I think is the most powerful takeaway of all of this is, you hear people's lives and I hear my life and I still don't think it's anything compared to other people because it's just like you just do it, right? You just
You're
like,
used to
okay,
it.
this is the hand that you're dealt. You just have to go through it. And I think what I've realized is that multiple people think, and we wait for, and especially in the entrepreneur, the small business space, or whatever it may be, we wait for that bottom to drop out, or we wait for our story to get worse before we decide to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of people wait for that, like to feel like, oh, I'm not qualified enough, or I'm not this enough, or I failed too many times. Like every moment is a teaching experience, everything is a point of reference, and never, ever, ever are you too far gone to come back from, right?
Never.
But the other thing is don't wait for it. Like create the opportunity now. And that's what I always tell people because when you create the opportunity, when you choose to come back and you choose to start moving forward, that's when the devil's going to attack you anyway. So if you're waiting
Yeah.
for this magnanimous story, to try and inspire others, get started now. See what happens,
Dude, 100%. Just waiting.
Yeah.
I think it's my favorite thing in The Alchemist, the book. I'm sure you've read The Alchemist, and he talks about how it's called beginner's luck or favorable probability. Once you finally decide to get started and go for it, God's going to help you in the beginning, right? Everything's going to line up. You're going to get that immediate success. Like when you started your business, like you're like, all right, cool, we're rolling. But then something's going to happen, right? And it's going to be that thing to show you, okay, like, yeah, you can do it. But then it's not going to be easy. And I had that part with my business where it started off really good. And then you start to hit this thing. And that's where you start fighting with those thoughts again that come back to you. And they're like, man, it's that self-talk that you have to be able to identify the difference between the voices. And the best way I heard that was in a sermon I was listening to the other day, and he was saying the best way to know God's voice is whatever's good, whatever's pointing you in the right direction of goodness and more and expanding. That's how you know it's God's voice. If it's something that's going to better you and it's something that's going to push you to expand and help other people, that's what God's voice is. And that other voice, that's just either somebody else from your past talking to you, some bad experience, or the adversary,
Mm-hmm.
Powerful, man.
It's so true. And the kind of like you said too, it comes in waves. And I think when you can abandon, because the victim mentality, it's not just this one thing that you just get over. The critic, the inner critic is not something that, for some people it can be, that you just conquer, or that person that you found early on. Like that's what Jesus is for, is to be able to say, like, this is who I have been and you died for me. Like I'm good enough there. I'm dirt as a human being, right? But like in your eyes, I was enough. I was worthy,
Yeah.
and that's heavy for just a lot of people because it's like we don't realize that. But the other part of it is it's life is not, or at least that I've experienced, life is not just this one big comeback story, from one thing. Like people look at it that like, where's my one thing? Where is it? I just had three more the other, like, in the
Yeah.
last, Shane is now, oh goodness, he's almost a year, right? It's almost a year. And to say that, like, yeah, the last 10 months were some of the hardest over longevity for different reasons. Nothing even cancer or anything related per se, but mental health, like relational, financial health, trying to put the pieces together that everyone goes through. Those are all hard too. And that's the thing that we need to extract is like, what is your hard? Because it's different for everybody. Everyone has a different 10 out of 10. And like, especially what you don't know, you don't know. You don't know the capability that you can push through. You don't know how challenged, like how strong you are until you find out how far you can go. And that's
Man.
why
Yeah.
it's such a powerful thing, like why people should exercise, why we should challenge ourselves to fast, why we should meditate, why we should pray, why we, like, yeah, don't get lost in the cold shower and think you're tough.
Yeah.
I was that at one point, but like,
Me
it
too.
was, okay, I could do that. What else can I do? And how far can I go? Um, but yeah, it's even in the last month, I'm still a work in progress. Like, and my faith is a work in progress. My mindset. I coached the other day, and I'll land the plane with this stuff here. But like, I had a presentation lined up for me at Bay Health. I was telling you about that
I don't
about
know. I don't
yesterday.
think so.
So, the irony of this too, I had done this little small presentation for this guy that was a part of a wellness committee for a hospital, and this is before any of this happened, right? And he commissioned for me, and he was like really petitioning for me to get in there and speak to Bay Health, one of the hospitals locally here. Now, the irony is, I really wanted to get into kind of use some of the principles of like Beyond the Bar, but apply it to healthcare workers
Yeah.
because I spent more time in hospitals in the last
Yeah.
2 years than anything. And I do it as a coach, as a patient, as a parent, and seeing all of it and spin it
Right.
together. They're burned out, man, but they're human. They want to help. And what was crazy was like I got pitched this opportunity 3 weeks before. I went and got radiation for 3 weeks, like drove down to Hopkins every day, destroyed my gut, destroyed my brain, destroyed my energy. Then my son, Shane, ends up having these seizures out of nowhere and is having these, it's called drug resistant epilepsy. So we checked him in. I ended up canceling my radiation because I couldn't be away from him. We took him to CHOP Saturday before Thanksgiving. We stay all the way through Thanksgiving. And most people wouldn't experience this till later in life. He goes through it in 5 days and he built up a resistance to all the medications that he could. So now what we're looking at is he has to get brain surgery to
Oh,
detach part of that part of his brain that is like short circuiting essentially.
yeah.
So it's like,
It's
what?
wild.
Like, and meanwhile, yeah, I got the radiation was for the spot treatment, but I don't have any other answers as to like what the other things, because, bits and pieces of me are falling apart,
Yeah.
falling to pieces anyway. And it's just like, you just keep rolling. You just do it. And delivered that presentation the other day at the doctors, like talking to them. And the devil wanted me not to show up that day. And I always say that, like, everything in my body wanted me to not show up that day. I had a bad day. I was hurting physically. I was hurting emotionally. I was still wounded from like radiation. My energy was dog crap. But when you just show up, you have no idea who needs you that day. You
Man.
have no idea the message that you can put forth, the impact that you can have, the power that you can have on someone else's life. Like, that's why I preach make moments matter, because you never will get that opportunity or that moment back.
Yeah.
God gave it to you for a reason. Make the most of it. Every breath, every day. Like, you're talking about the power of breath, 100%. It's to help you stay grounded. The present moment is a gift. That's why they
Yeah.
call it present, right?
I like that. Yeah.
And yeah, I leave there and I find out I got a DDT in my leg. So I was like, sick.
Wow.
You know,
The tests just keep coming, man.
you just roll with it, man. It's like Atlas pushing the rock.
Yeah, so one of the things you said there was just like make moments matter and being there to impact other people every day, and you never know who you're going to help that day. And I have it like written right up here on my wall that I look at every day, like who needs me at my best today. And you never know who needs you at your best on any given day and whose life you're going to impact just by going out of your way to say something nice to somebody or just do something out of the normal, which honestly, selfishly, it makes me feel good about myself too. And it makes me have a better day as well. But you go out of your way, you send something nice to someone, you see them smile, and it comes back tenfold. You're really heavily centered around God, and it's just incredible some of the things He's done in your life. And I moved down here about a year ago, and I started to find God when I moved down to Florida. And just having faith it changes your life just by having that ability to believe that it takes the pressure off of you. It takes your ego away. And like you were saying, sometimes you look at yourself, even though you overcame all these things, you still look at yourself and like, man, I'm still not doing as good as other people, right?
Yeah.
But then you look back, this is what I like to do. I look back 5 years ago and I tell somebody, look back 5 years ago. Where were you then? And look where you're at now. And when you can see the growth because we start comparing to everybody. Like I could compare to your story and be like, damn, man, Ryan, look, you see all the things he's went through. I haven't went through anything. Like I should be like, you know what? And I'm like, but I look back 5 years ago because who was I 5 years ago? And that's a whole different person. I don't even know who that is anymore. But it's just one of the hacks I've done. It's just okay. I can compare myself. I can let my ego tell me I need all these things. And one of the biggest discoveries I found was I always thought it was like you need the money, you need the status, you need like all this recognition. But once you just start working on understanding who you are, understanding I can control my emotions like we talked about with anxiety or fear or any of that stuff, you can wake up and be happy every day, even if the things around you. Because I woke up some days and I'm waking up and I'm like, hey, my business this one's failing, right? It's not where I want it to be. I just switched from health and fitness after building it for a year, and now I had the great idea to start over again. And I'm looking every day, but I'm like, I'm upbeat though because I know that there's a plan. I wouldn't have these ideas in my head. I wouldn't be called to this. I wouldn't be wanting to do this so bad if it wasn't on my agenda of things that I was supposed to be doing with my life. And like you were saying, the biggest thing is go get started. You can sit here and think about it. Like you said, mental masturbation. You can talk about it. You can tell all your friends. And that's actually, it might actually give you more endorphins than actually just going and doing the damn thing. Because you always find out, even if you fail. I had a client tell me this the other day. I just felt good. I asked the girl out, and I don't care how it's going to end up, but I'm glad I asked her out, and it felt really good. And I did that the other day. I just walked into the schools that I said I was going to do for months, and when you walk in, you're just like, damn it, I did it. And I don't care if it didn't work out, but I feel good about myself for doing what I said I was going to do. So, man, all of those things that you're just hitting on are just, man, they're like teaching lessons, and your life story is just such a lesson in itself. Man, you're going to inspire. Like I know you want to inspire millions. You're going to inspire millions. It's you have all the tools. You're coming back. It's an amazing what you're doing, brother.
Thank you, bro. I mean, I think what's funny too is what you just said. It shifted now so much of where in the beginning it was goal related. It was absolutely goal related. I wanted to be, one of the greats, one of the top 10 type thing. And now, like after having two kids, after doing the things like it, what you just said is it's more about who you want to be, what you are working towards, but what I always say is like who you're becoming in the process. And as long as that is in accordance with like now, and rather than saying, I want to be the top 10, like I raised at that thing, right?
Brother, I'm about to say 6 months ago I heard you say this
Yeah.
at an event.
That was still so there's still opportunity
That was
there,
in
right?
June.
You gotta put yourself out there. but at the same opportunity, it was like, it's not because of that same intrinsic motivation. It is now, okay, but what is that going to put me in a position to do for others? And I think when we can
Yeah.
check ourselves and say, it's not the money, the girls, the this, the that, the Lambo, it's more of like, I can serve people and help them and that get this message if it inspires them to pull them out of a dark place in their life, or pick one more day, or reach out to that friend, or believe in themselves enough to start that business and burn the boats behind him. If it makes them call their parent who they haven't spoke to in a while, their child, like,
Yes.
make moments matter. That is what counts, and that was the reason that I started Beyond the Bar. Was it's just that the purpose of trying to get us to become that best version of ourselves so that we can leave other people's lives better too, right? Like, that's what we're here for at the end of the day. And
100%, man.
we can spread the gospel in the process, and do it a different way. um, I think that's really key too, like, maybe I'm not the most well-spoken Christian in the world, but I'll talk to you about Jesus all day
Yeah.
long.
And that's even more relatable, man. I don't want to have somebody that's got 30 years of experience. Like somebody's a couple years ahead of me. That's who I want to learn from. I can relate to them. You went through the same things that I went through. You were blacking out. You were a bartender. You had the things, the same experiences. So when I hear you say it, I'm like, okay, that's a guy that was just like me, had a lot of the same experiences, and he can battle through these three insane events. Now I'm walking out of here wanting to run through a wall, and I'm like, that's what motivation is. I think we and I even do it myself. We tell ourselves we have to be this polished person. We have to be perfect. We have to have all the degrees. We have to have all the experience to even go apply for the speeches, to go even do the things that we want to do. But honestly, man, it's our like your message, brother. I went to your Instagram. Our mess is our message, and that is it right there. Your mess is your message. And the only reason I can do this is because I messed up so many times. I can tell people where not to go. But if
Yeah.
I came out being perfect, how the hell can I relate to somebody that is struggling with all the things that I used to struggle with? You can't. So your mess is your message, and I love that. And I got a couple quotes of yours here that I wanted to hit. I know I want to be respectful of your time though. I don't know if you have to run. We can cut it out, but yeah,
No, you're good, dude. I mean, I can rap for as long as you need to. Honestly, I love it. And anytime we can get the, you know, iron sharpens iron.
yeah. So
So,
there's one thing I have to ask you that the Low said I have to ask, and if you don't want to share it, we can cut it. But I definitely want to ask about this. She's like, you gotta ask him about this event that he went to where he had this out of body experience. Can you tell us about that?
the,
The seminar where you had an out of body experience?
yeah. Oh, that was essentially kind of how. So we have different talks for different things, right? And like, that's why I say, there's my keynote or my testimony, because you could see how long that can take, or I can,
If it is a long one, we can do it on another one for sure.
I mean, we could always do it on another one, but no, it's the instance that I would say that, and why I was saying that is because that was the entrepreneurial, like, moment for me. So created Beyond the Bar, had that whole, just accumulation of knowledge and wanting to be something, and just wanting to, like, man, I wanted to create this business that was different from everything that's ever been done. I wanted to create
Yeah.
something out of nothing, and so I signed up for, I think it was Brendan Burchard, actually. I think it was his, like, one of his
Yeah.
made influencer. It was influencer back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, that sounds perfect. That's epic. I want to do that. And dude, leading up to it, that mental masturbation, that's where I got it from. I'm like, man, I got to talk to everybody. And I'm, back in here, I thought I was the shit, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm doing something with my life. I'm going to build
Yeah.
this. And I'm going out to California. So I go out there, and it's this 3-day seminar. And if you've ever been in one of those settings, you know it. Like, you're on fire, and
Mhm.
it feels incredible. However, the opposite happened to me. So you go out there and you're surrounded by like 2,000 people, man, of, okay, well, sweet, these are all people, but the imposter syndrome started to kick in too. And there's this level of confidence that I went out there with that all of a sudden kind of like, all right, I'm cool. I got this. I'm building a business. And I would start it, and they break you off into these little groups, and they say, okay, now like tell people what your dreams are and what your goals are, and you know how you want to do this. What's your business? And you break off into groups, and I would tell them the concept of it, and I was like, man, that's kind of cool. And then all of a sudden, dude, it was like, so who are you helping? And I just blacked out, and I was like, uh, I don't. And I was like, pass. Like just I couldn't come up with anything.
Yeah.
And then so we break up in another group, and they were like, okay, explain your business, like your elevator pitch for Beyond the Bar. And I was like, dude, I get into this group again, and I had nothing, like just blacked out completely. And I was like, this is fucking embarrassing, dude. I could talk to anybody about this. I've not shut up about this in the
Yeah.
last, year of my life. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Break into another group. It happens again, dude. And I was done. So the final speaker of the day was Eric Thomas, of all people.
Oh my God.
You're fired up. I'm just
Yeah.
angry, and I'm listening to him, and I'm just like taking notes on it and stuff. But it was like he asked these three questions, and it was like, what you just said, who do you need to be for that other person? Who's counting on you? And what is your dream, right? So I wrote those questions down, and I couldn't even answer them. And I was just like, fuck this. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
I dropped like 3 grand on the ticket, and I left that day.
No
And I
way.
ended up, I went back to what I knew, right? So I found the closest great restaurant, tied on a couple brews, good dinner, and I was like, went and worked out. Maybe that order might be a little bit off. Worked out, then had those things. And I was like, I took Advil PMs, and I was like, I'm calling it a night. I'm done. I'll start over tomorrow. I ended up waking up like 2.5 hours later, and it's, you know, 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, I'm freaking out. All of a sudden, I'm having this panic attack, and I was like, oh my God, dude, this is all right. This is something. So I got up, and again, I try and work through my routine. So I'm like, it's all good, dude. You haven't had I hadn't had a panic attack. I used to get them all the time. Haven't had one in like over a year. Now I'm out in California, and I'm at this influencer event trying to become this best version of myself. And I am freaking out, dude, in this hotel room by myself. I'm like, and then your brain starts going like, dude, are you gonna die? Are you gonna have a heart attack in this
Yeah.
room? Like, so I'm going through the motions, dude, and I started going through my routine, which at the time was sort of like, okay, go exercise, try and take a cold shower, journal, meditate, breath work, whatever it could do, and nothing worked, dude. I was so angry. Like it was really like anger. I got this panic to subside, and then it was just anger, and I'm like working out, and I couldn't get it off my head. I went for a run. I'm running around like San Diego, very dangerous, 4 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
and freaking out. I got lost, got back home, and I'm like, you idiot. Like I just couldn't stop the negative chatter in my head.
Yeah.
It was replaying yesterday's events. So I go in there, I'm trying to take a cold shower, didn't do anything. And now I'm actually starting to kind of freak out because I can't shake this feeling, and I know my heart has been pounding for a while. And I'm sitting there, and I journal. I try to journal about it, dude, and I just like blacked out, and I couldn't write
What?
anything either. And I'm like, yo, what is happening? Like thought I was actually having some sort of event, and I'm like meditating, and the whole time I'm meditating, I'm just getting more and more angry. I'm praying, and dude, and at this point, like I go into prayer. And mind you, yeah, I'd gotten saved maybe like a year prior at this point, but like I'm in prayer, and I'm like, I started getting mad at God. And I was like, God, this is before cancer, before my kids, before anything, right? And I'm like, God, you brought me out here for some reason. Like I said, Beyond the Bar was your idea, it wasn't mine. You wanted me to do this.
Yeah.
why am I here? Like, why did I spend the money to come out here if I'm not going to be able to talk to anybody, if I'm not going to be able to believe in my own business enough to talk about it, and I can't even think about it enough to like go to this seminar and enjoy it or learn anything?
Yeah.
And crickets, dude, just like nothing. And I was just like, screw this. I'm just sitting there. So the last thing I had in my repertoire was this breath work, and it's kind of like a mix of like a Wim Hof, but it was basically like this low level hyperventilation build up, and I'm just trying to get my breath and my heart rate under control. So as I'm doing this, dude, I started like, okay, well, I'm going through the motions, I'm doing some deep breaths, and I'm just like, all right, calm down, calm down, calm down. And I started to just, not on purpose, but like replay the questions that ET gave us the day before. And it was like, all right, what is your dream? And I was like, help people in the restaurant industry, to help them find their dreams so that they can better the lives of other people that they come in contact with. And I'm like just doing this motion, and I'm starting to get a little bit more angry and a little bit more irritated here. And like, I couldn't get rid of this anger. So the more I'm starting to breathe, now I'm like losing my breath, and I'm like starting to hyperventilate here. And I started to go to the second question, and I was like, okay, well then who's counting on you? Who needs you to be that best version of yourself, And I'm like, it's this person, and I'm like, I'm still trying to breathe through it, dude. And I'm like, all right, it's your friends who at the time they were working in the restaurant industry as well, and they were living the same lifestyle that I was, like just
Yeah.
stuck in the basement. They're burned out. They were tired of the lives, but they didn't know what they wanted to do, and they just running this rat race. And I'm like, no, it's not them. It's these people. It's the people that you really want to serve that don't know what they don't know, that they don't know how to help
Yeah.
themselves, and this and this. And it was like, no, it wasn't that either. And dude, I'm working up through my breath work at this time, and it was like, who's counting on you to be that best version of yourself? And dude, I flashed to my wife at the time, and that always tears me up. Um, I flashed to her because she was the person that believed in me, that like gave me the power to start this, you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
took a chance on me. She was working more to provide for my dream, and
Yeah. Oh
so
man.
that I could build this. And I'm like, dude, but I said, but she can't, because she can't quit her job in the restaurant industry because you aren't doing your job enough to provide for her to take care of your wife. So instead, she's facilitating your dream. And I was like, you fucking loser.
Oh my
And
God.
dude, it just, even though it wrecked me, I kept flashing back in between people, me. I kept flashing because I'm sitting, mind you, I didn't paint this picture for you. I'm sitting in front of a mirror in my underwear at 4 o'clock in the morning, having
Uh-huh.
a full blown panic attack, like cold and alone in a hotel room floor.
Yeah.
And at this point, bro, my heart rate's got to be like 180. And I'm like, they're either going to find me dead or
Oh my God.
bleeding in here
Wow.
in my underwear, and just like, and as I flashed, even though that thought of her destroyed me and was 100% true, I flashed to myself and I was like, you selfish prick. Like, all you can think about is yourself, and you want this dream to be true, and you want to be able to do this so that you could prove it to other
Man.
people. And dude, it was like this James Earl Jones. It was the first time I had ever felt God's voice in my life. And I'm
Wow.
visualizing myself unintentionally. And I'm seeing this, like, me in my underwear freaking out. And instead of seeing myself in that moment, everything else slipped away. And it was just me. And it was me, like, alone and just crying. And I was like crying out for God. And it was this like voice. I can't even explain it, dude, but it was this voice of, you needed you, and you have never been there. You've never believed in yourself
Wow,
enough
brother.
to do the things. The dream that I put in you was your dream. You just never believed in it enough. You know what I mean? I gave that dream to you, and you needed you.
You didn't surrender to it. Yeah.
Not all these people,
Yeah.
not your friends, not your wife. Every time what I realized in that moment, after I broke, like ugly cry, broke,
Yeah.
it what I realized that God was telling me in that moment was like I wasn't creating this dream for other people. I was creating this dream for that version of myself that needed to see it was possible.
Yeah.
That I needed to
It's
believe,
deep.
right? And it was just this like I mean ugly cry. Like in cold, alone, in my underwear on a hotel room floor, thousands of miles from home. I found myself, I felt God's voice.
Whew.
It was just this like kick the walls down on everything, bro. I rolled into that presentation the next day, that day, just like cloud nine,
Yeah.
everything that was fluid,
Found it.
clicking, just the highest vibrational frequency you can
Oh yeah.
imagine. Like everyone was vibing, like even like trying to get
It's the
my
best.
number and
Yeah.
making connections, and it was like it was the craziest feeling, man. And I remember just coming back and building from that, and
Oh
and
my gosh.
realizing
Powerful. Yeah.
so many different, like, just insane things that were just clicking from that point on. And then, the extraction of that was people were going to what I was content with up until that point. I realized is that I was secretly, even though I was telling everybody else about this dream, even though I was like all about it and enamored with it, there was still a small part of me, but a very strong part of me that was sitting on the drain, right? The suction
Yeah.
cup of this
Yeah.
life. And it was the part of me that was okay with being the guy that said, that was my idea, right? That somebody else could take it to run with
Oh,
it
that's
and push
that's
it.
powerful. Oh man, yeah, that's the worst one, man.
And that
Yeah,
was the truth, that I
and you
was
were scared to
okay.
be that guy deep down,
I
and
was
that's why
okay
you
with
couldn't
it.
get it out.
Yep.
Wow.
That was stronger than the version of me that actually believed in myself. And that's what the underlying belief was holding me back was I was secretly okay and more comfortable being that guy who said, that was my idea once,
Yeah.
blaming other people for why it didn't come into fruition,
Yeah.
not taking that accountability. And that was like, dude, God just boom, wrecked it with a sledgehammer. And
Man.
and that's the truth, though. A lot of us fall into that. They don't want to admit it. We don't want to admit it. But so many of us would rather be content spending the rest of our lives wondering, what if, and I had that idea, and man, that would have been this, because someone else's success becomes the determining factor of proof and
That it could have been
validation
done.
that it could have been done
Mm.
because they did it, not you,
Wow.
right?
Hey, thanks for sharing that story, man. That one hits home, man. And but what you did there, so for everybody that's trying to figure out like how does Ryan do this? Like how does he go through these transformations? How does he connect with God? What he did was he realized in this event that something was missing, something was off. He didn't have something, right? And instead of just continuing to distract himself, he could have scrolled, he could have went home, he could have watched Netflix. He tried to be by himself. He did everything to search every quadrant of his brain to figure out what is this thing. And that's the scariest thing though, honestly, man, is facing yourself, facing that inner voice, facing your insecurities. And you had to go through and break down and be like, man, my wife is depending on me and she's believing in me and I'm not even believing in myself right now. Like how am I going to go home with any type of like dignity, like knowing this, right? So you had to do the hard thing that most people aren't going to do. And that's where all the growth is, man. It's sitting yourself in that room by yourself in your underwear in the bathroom, 4 a.m, crying and be like, what is it that I'm missing? What is it? And facing that music, man, that is powerful. I've been there. I know exactly what I've had that experience in like a different story, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's real, man. You have to be by yourself. And people can't get past the part of being alone and being lonely. But there is the lonely chapters, and people talk about it, and it's true. You have to go through that lonely phase because you can't know yourself. You can't know who you are, know what you want. You can't hear that voice of God or universe or whatever's pulling you unless you get into a quiet spot. And the fact that you were able to do that and it was your breakthrough moment for pretty much everything, man. I mean, that's amazing, brother. And one of the things, I think we kind of talked about this earlier, just getting in your own head and like serving people. And you said, instead of me focusing on being a top 10 speaker, let me focus on serving people. And I think that's all from thinking from your heart instead of your head. And that's one thing I try to do is just like think from your heart rather than your head. Because when you think with your head, you're thinking about me, ego, material, status, women, like all those things. You think from your heart, man, you're coming from a whole different area. And when you do that, everything flows. And I think that was the most difficult part with me in sales at the beginning. I'm thinking about the sale, right? I'm thinking about getting the client. But if you stop and you say, get out of my head, all right, and get into my heart. How can I help? How can I serve today? Regardless of what happens, how can I make an impact on this call? And you start serving with that heart, man, everything changes. And man, great stuff there, man.
Dude, head and heart, that not enough people can make that connection or that distinction, but ooh, that's the money right there, man. 100% true. And when you're in your head, I think I just said this the other day, weird enough. Um, the difference of like when you're in your head, I kind of look at it like you're in your heart, you're in the roots, you're in the root of the tree or the plant that you've done. Like it's getting deeper into the soil. And yeah, the deeper that it goes, the more it's going to find out. But if you're in your head, you're left up to the storms like that are just going to be blowing you all over the place, man. So
Yeah,
you get in that heart, you're rooted. You're rooted in your why. You're rooted in exactly what matters to you. You're up top. You're coming and going.
yeah. Well said. I got one last one. I know we've been on here for a while, but you got so much great content and stories, brother. But hopefully we can hop on one in the future. But last quote, this one hit me crazy. You actually hit me with this one day when I needed to hear it. And you said, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And man, that one just resonates so hard. If you could talk about that one for a second.
Yeah, I think actually that might have come from a seminar as well. In that same, I don't think it was that same one, but it was that same feeling. And I think the reason um, why that story resonates with people, if it does, is it's the hero's journey that you just described. So much of what we're talking about, like even my story, my testimony, it's even if we're just looking at it as like, yeah, that's inspiring, that's this, it's biblical in that it is kind of metaphorical, right? So
Yeah.
Aaron's story is just, you can look at it and extract what piece we see ourselves in and use that as the catalyst, the motivation, the thing that we need to power through. And I think that's where you have so many different things that happen to you, or you're trying to accomplish, or throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. When you are trying to do something that you believe in and you feel called to, you're going to meet more opposition than if you're just trying to, I think I'll take this, right? Because when you feel called to something, you have to do exactly what you just described. You have to go through the hero's journey of cutting away all the fat and trimming everything
Yeah.
else that's a distraction, and being able to decipher what is fact and fiction, what is noise, and what is actually your thought or God's word, or that the power of the universal tugging. And to do that, you got to go silent in a world where we are so uncomfortable getting quiet and alone and not distracted. Like you're going to figure out real quick that if you're not called to it, you're not going to keep fighting. And
Nah.
the biggest thing that I'd even end with is like, yeah, God, he's going to if he put a calling on your heart, it's for a reason. And you can look at any references through the Bible of people that would, been called. They
Hmm.
all went through battle. They all
All of
went
them.
through storm. They all went through adversity. And that's so important to draw from because, yeah, dude, if it's the greater the calling, the greater the why, the greater
Yeah,
the adversity. He's got to,
100%.
you have to be tested if to know that you want it. And you're not just going to sell the dream to give it away, to be content with being the person that says, I had that, you know?
Yeah.
But I think that's the other thing is multiple people, and especially nowadays, multiple people are going to believe in the same thing, and especially in our industry or
Yeah.
just entrepreneurial space business. Like there's going to be someone out there, I think that it's this game of probabilities. I like to look at it as a challenge. Like, I'm not the only person to ever have cancer,
Yeah.
right? I'm maybe the first person to make it this far. I'm still battling it. But at the same time, I like to look at it as this game of probabilities, like 10,000 people. You're only the one Kev, right? But there may be like 10,000 other people that have this same drive and dream, the thing that you have within you, but you're going to be the one that's going to take it the distance. And your
Yeah.
why has to be so unique to you that it can't be someone else's,
It
right? So
can't be. That's the biggest one right there. Yeah.
yes, it's
You.
yours, your why. He called you, he will qualify you. But your qualifying is going to be through fire, right?
Yeah.
So get ready for that. That's what I'd like just to do all the things to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the only way. And you're doing it. you know what I'm
Right,
saying?
bro. The only way you can stick with it is if you know, like, you just know this is what I want. I mean, because I'm hitting those obstacles now, and I know you've had crazy obstacles, and you even had the point where you thought about giving up. But when it's in you, and like Ryan knows that he has this gift. He knows he has this ability to inspire, to articulate his words, and he knows he's just a little more special in this area than some other people are. And everybody knows it, right? They know that they have these gifts, and if you can lean into those, and like you said, it's going to get messy. It's not going to be pretty. It's not always going to work out how you want it. But the cool thing is, as you evolve and learn yourself and take steps and fail, your vision is going to change. Right now, Ryan's vision is going to change. Right now, he has a vision, but as he goes through more experiences and helps more people, it's going to change. Like he started with Beyond the Bar, and now it's morphing into something else because he had different experiences in life. Now he's going to go into a hospital and help people there, and he didn't expect that 5 years ago. But as you continue to grow, understand yourself better, your life is going to take on its own journey, but you have to be okay with stepping into the unknown without knowing, right? You got to be able to take that first step and trust yourself. And like you said, burn the boats. I say the safety net, but whatever it is, get rid of that thing, go for it, test yourself. And if you believe in yourself, and I mean, that's the hardest thing is belief, right? But you have a rock of a wife, which sounds amazing. And I believe that's one of the things. Everybody has to have somebody that believes in them a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because you need those people that are going to pick you up because you're going to have those days. And that's why, I mean, if you want to hire Ryan, a great coach, and you hire a coach because people like me and Ryan, we know that we've been through it, right? We know what it feels like to step through it. So if you've already done the work, it's easy to believe in somebody else because you already done the steps. You already know what it takes, and you know, hey, I'm not superhuman. Like I'm not even close to where I want to be, but I know that I'm a lot better off than I was 3-4 years ago. And just having that belief in yourself allows you to believe in everybody around you. But brother, yeah, man, it was. I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, you're an inspiration. I mean, keep on battling, keep on staying positive. I mean, I know you got it. I wish your kids all the best, and I look forward to many more of these. But brother, you're so inspiring, so motivating. And where can people find you if they want to follow you on social or connect with you?
Dude, thank you, man. Listen, I actually, before I do that too, that was kind of funny that I was describing to my wife. I was like talking to Kev. She was like, Kev, who? And I was like, yeah, because I like throw people's names around. I was like, Handsome Kevin, the life coach. I was like, That one. Right? Oh, okay, got it. Well, it's like that's the way you're known in my house. It's been hard to stare at you this whole time while my reflection is that I just blend into here. But if anybody is interested in looking at or following even just the journey, even if you're not interested in coaching or anything like that, you can follow me on Instagram at Ryan Ennis Motivator. I'm on Facebook. I couldn't get all the names, organized because I'd have to restart them all again.
Yeah.
Facebook at Red Ryan. I think LinkedIn is Ryan Ennis because I'm a professional. The website we can probably link somewhere in here, but RyanEnnisMotivator.com, and that's where you can find any sort of Make Moments Matter apparel.
Get your shirts.
And some other stuff, but thank you, brother, and thank you to anybody that's listening, because it's an attention span thing, but it's the last bit that you had just touched on, and I'll leave it, that nugget of wisdom, dude. You have the calling, right? And I heard this from Pastor Darius Daniels, and if you've never listened to him, check him out, dude. Darius Daniels, he's a wordsmith. But he was saying, like, he's changed in his life. So he knows, he was talking about being a pastor. Well, one day his calling will, or his time as a pastor may shift, but his calling has not, because he's created other kingdoms and things like that for God. So he says, your occupation, your job, your skill set may change, may evolve, may take new shape, but the calling that God has placed on your life, that will not change. Right?
Yeah.
That is still rooted in what you do. So don't be discouraged, I guess, to the person that is here, that it feels like you're compromising yourself, or, like, oh man, I said I would do this. I said I would do this. Look at as far back as I started, like wanting to be a cop. That was the first. It was insignificant, but that could be so many things for so many people, that their parents are held in highest regard, that they can't tell them. They're afraid to tell them anything. They're afraid to disappoint them. I was. And that was the biggest step for me that far back, that I was like, I have to be able to tell my dad that I don't want to be the thing I've always told him that I wanted to be. And I have to be uncomfortable and aware and be able to say, I don't know. I don't know what I want. Right? So get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable, but man, never discount yourself either. Like, just keep going. Trust yourself. Get around people like Kevin. Like, get around. Following is free. You can pay to get behind the scenes stuff and the stuff that we're talking about here, but proximity, environment, people.
Proximity is power.
Mm-hmm. If your corner isn't inspiring you, if the people that you aren't hanging around with or following aren't inspiring you, you live in a cage.
They should make you feel uncomfortable. You should be uncomfortable being around them because they're doing better. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Beauty. Well, thank you, Kev, and I appreciate you for having me on here, brother.
I appreciate you, brother.